This is video 4 and the conclusion to the will to power. I am going right to the last chapter, his chapter on eternal recurrence, and I'm going to read the entire last chapter, and you're going to see all the themes of what the will to power is, his vision of Superman, the term that's been coined in regards to this, and all of these themes: the eternal recurrence, consciousness of strength, energy, and self-creation. My philosophy reveals the triumphant thought through which all other systems of thought must ultimately perish. It is the great disciplinary thought. Those races cannot bear it are doomed. Those which regard it as the greatest blessing are destined to rule. The greatest of all fights. For this purpose, a new weapon is required. A hammer, a terrible alternative must be created. Europe must be brought face to face with the logic of facts and confronted with the question whether its will for ruin is really earnest. General leveling down to mediocrity must be avoided. Rather than this, it would be preferable to perish. A pessimistic attitude of mind and a pessimistic doctrine and ecstatic nihilism may in certain circumstances even prove indispensable to the philosopher. That is to say, as a mighty form of pressure or hammer with which he can smash up degenerate, perishing races and put them out of existence, with which he can beat a track to a new order of life, or instill a longing for non-entity in those who are degenerate and those who desire to perish. I wish to teach the thought which gives unto many the right to cancel their existence, the great disciplinary thought. Eternal recurrence, a prophecy. The exposition of the doctrine and its theoretical first principles and results. The proof of the doctrine. Probable results which will follow from it being believed. It makes everything break open. The means of enduring it, the means of ignoring it, its place in history in a means, the period of greatest danger, the foundation of an oligarchy above peoples and their interests, education, directed at establishing a political policy for humanity in general. The two greatest philosophical points of view, both discovered by Germans, that of becoming and that of evolution, that based upon the value of existence, but the wretched form of German pessimism must be overcome. Both points of view reconciled by me in a decisive manner. Everything becomes and returns forever. Escape is impossible. Granted that we could appraise the value of existence, what would be the result of it? The thought of recurrence is a principle of selection in the service of power. The ripeness of man for his thought. The thought of eternal recurrence in first principles, which must be necessarily be true if it were true, what its result is. It is the most oppressive thought, its probable result, provided it be not prevented, that is to say, provided all values be not transvalued. The means of enduring it, the transvaluation of all values, pleasure no longer to be found in certainty, but in uncertainty. No longer cause and effect, but continual creativeness. No longer the will to self-preservation, but to power. No longer the modest expression, it is all only subjective, but it's all our work, let us be proud of it. In order to endure the thought of recurrence, freedom from morality is necessary. New means against the fact, pain regarded as the instrument, as the father of pleasure. There is no accretive consciousness of pain. Pleasure derived from all kinds of uncertainty and tentativeness as a counterpoise to extreme fatalism. Suppression of the concept necessity, suppression of the will, suppression of absolute knowledge. Greatest elevation of man's consciousness of strength is that which creates Superman. The two extremes of thought, the materialistic and the Platonic, are reconciled in eternal recurrence. Both are regarded as ideals. If the universe had a goal, that good goal would have been reached by now. If any sort of unforeseen final state existed, that state also would have been reached. If it were capable of any halting or stability of any being, it would have only have possessed this capability of becoming stable for one instant in its development, and again becoming would have been at an end for ages, and with all thinking and all spirit. The fact of intellects being in a state of development proves that the universe can have no goal, no final state, and is incapable of being. But the old habit of thinking of some purpose in regards to all phenomena, and thinking of a directing and creating deity in regard to the universe, is so powerful that the thinker has to go to great pains in order to avoid thinking of the very aimlessness of the world as intended. The idea that the universe intentionally evades a goal, and even knows artificial means wherewith it prevents itself from falling into a circular movement, must occur to all those who would fain attribute to the universe the capacity of eternal regenerating itself. That is to say, they would fain impose upon a finite, definite force, which is invariable in quantity, like the universe, the miraculous gift of renewing its forms and its conditions for all eternity. Although the universe is no longer a God, it must still be capable of the divine power of creating and transforming. It must forbid itself to relapse into any one of its previous forms. It must not only have the intention, but also the means of avoiding any sort of repetition. Every second of its existence, even it must control every single one of its movements with a view of avoiding goals, final states, and repetitions, and all the other results of such an unpardonable and insane method of thought and desire. All this is nothing more than the old religious mode of thought and desire, which, in spite of all, longs to believe that in some way or other the universe resembles the old, beloved, infinite, and infinitely creative God. That in some way or other the old God still lives. That longing of Spinoza's, which is expressed in the words, which I can't pronounce, which then is proposition and belief, in which the decisive change, the present preponderance of the scientific spirit over the religious and God-fancying spirit is best formulated. Ought it not to be the universe as force must not be thought of as unlimited, because it cannot be thought of in this way. We forbid ourselves the concept infinite force, because it is incompatible with the idea of force, whence it follows that the universe lacks the power of eternal renewal. The principle of conservation of energy inevitably involves eternal recurrence. That a state of equilibrium has never been reached proves that it is impossible. But in infinite space it must have been reached. Likewise, in spherical space, the form of space must be the cause of the eternal movement, and ultimately of all imperfection. That energy and stability and immutability are contradictory. The measure of energy is fixed, though it is essentially fluid. That which is timeless must be refuted. At any given moment of energy, the absolute conditions for a new distribution of all forces are present, it cannot remain stationary. Change is part of its essence. Therefore, time is as well. By this means, however, the necessity of change has only been established once more in theory. A certain emperor always bore the fleeting nature of all things in his mind, in order not to value them too seriously, and to be able to live quietly in their midst. Conversely, everything seems to me much too important for it to be so fleeting. I seek an eternity for everything. Ought one to pour the most precious salves and wines into the sea? My consolation is that everything that is true is eternal. The sea will wash it up again. I'm going to stop there and we'll start up the next video, which will be the final conclusion.